computer. Okay, I'll just repeat very briefly what we, because I forgot to start recording. So there are four levels of explanation of the Torah called Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Pshat, the simple, straightforward explanation. Remez, things that are hinted to. Very often, gematria is used there. Drush or drush is the homiletical explanation. Sod, the secret, the Kabbalistic explanation of the Torah. We're about to explain that different commentaries use different are expert in different areas of explanation. I mentioned already at the beginning that Rashi is one of the commentaries, and Rashi's commentary is what is called Pshat, the simple, straightforward explanation. There are others, the Baal HaTurim, for example. The Baal HaTurim explains things according to Remez, and I'll give examples of these soon, so you're not going to get lost. Drush is the homiletical explanation. This is brought a lot in the Midrash and in various works, like the works of Musar. Musar means homily, really. It means homily or ethical teachings, essentially. Musar, ethical teachings, and then there's Sod, Kabbalah, the secrets of the Torah, and the final level is called Chassidut, which combines really all of them together. Now, let's not make the mistake that when one of the commentaries offers one of you a commentary on a certain verse, that he's only talking from one point of view. He can combine a number of different points of view. Usually they tend towards one particular type of explanation and not so much the others, but they all do combine uh, various levels of explanation together. Now, I'm going to share screen again, and I'm going to show you a document. How does this all translate into planes of reality? So there's worlds or planes of reality. Forget about this concept here that seems in the concealment of the Ora and Sof. Let's not get into it now. Adam Kadmon, and this actually corresponds to, although I didn't write it in before, it corresponds to Chassidut, right? Chassidut, the highest teachings of the Torah, the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and those who followed him. Anyway, what's the world of Adam Kadmon? The world of Adam Kadmon is a primordial world, a meta world, essentially the world of potential. In other words, when we say world, what does the word world mean? The word world in Hebrew, olam, comes from the word he'elem, which means concealment. There was a concealment of the Orein Sof, a concealment of the divine infinite light, the infinite presence was concealed or not removed. That's actually a discussion, even an argument in Kabbalistic works, but or disagreement, let's say, not an argument. Um, the most common point of view today is that the Or Ein Sof was concealed and not actually removed. It was concealed in such a way that it remains completely concealed from rational understanding. But in any event, the Tzimtzum concealed the Or Ein Sof, and that created various planes of reality. The highest plane of reality then would be Adam Kadmon, the primordial world, the meta world. Sorry about that. Um, the world of Atzilut is the next world down, the next plane of reality. It's on a lower level, a lower plane. It's called the world of emanation or the world of proximity, from the word Eitzel in Hebrew, the word Eitzel. If we take these letters here, just drop the yud from it, then it's the word Eitzel, which means proximity, closeness. Then the world of Bria, the world of creation, and that corresponds to drush, homiletical explanation, and again, ethical explanation. Atzilut was Kabbalah, and I forgot to mention, I'm sorry. Yetzirah is the next plane of reality, the world of formation. And that corresponds to, in the Torah, that's the level of Remez. Remez is, again, allusions, sometimes using gematria, sometimes using other forms, and we'll get to examples of all of these soon. And you'll see why. And Asiya, the lowest world, is the world of Pshat. The simple, the straightforward explanation is the world of action, the world of matter, the world that more or less we know. The lowest aspect of the world of Asiya is this physical world in which we find ourselves. So The path, obviously, through the worlds is from Asiya to Yetzirah to Bria to Atzilut to Adam Kadmon. That would be from bottom to top. Let's see what someone's saying in the chat. Right. Yeah, one of the books recommended talks about fire, air, water, earth for you. Is this a related? And if so, is appropriate to hint here? All of these things are connected. Let me just explain what Ellen was asking about over here. She says like this. The world of Atzilut corresponds to the letter Yud of the divine name. The world of Bria corresponds to the first Hey of the divine name. So that would be if we wanna do it in English letters, I'll do it as just English letters. That would be the letter Yud or a Y. The world of Bria would be the capital H. Okay, the world of creation would be a Vav. A Vav, and the final thing would be a Hey. So that corresponds to the divine name. H-A-I. I'm sorry, that's H-A-I. And this is Yud. Okay, let's do it like that so it's easy to understand. Okay. Yud Hey Vav Hey. That's the divine name. Okay, so the highest level, of course, Yud corresponds to the world of Atzilut. Now, since there's the letter Yud in Hebrew, if I write that in Hebrew, the letter Yud, let me write it in, if I can find a better way of writing it, so that you'll be able to see it a little bit easier. Maybe this will be, yeah, that's a little better. Okay. Let me make that bigger for you so you can see it more clearly. Okay. Now, this letter Yud is a very small letter, as you can see. And the way it's written in the Torah, it's written with kind of a thorn on the top of it. It's like a little thorn on the top. That little thorn on the top corresponds to the world of Adam Kadmon, right? The thorn on the top of the Yud corresponds to the world of Adam Kadmon. Okay. And these are sometimes also explained as corresponding to fire, air, water, and earth. Earth would be the lowest one, water would be the second one, air would be the third one up, although some exchange air and water, and fire would be the fourth world, the world of Atzilut. But let's not get too much into correspondences now, because we'll get off the main topic. Okay, now, so that's we have therefore 4 levels of explanation corresponding to 4 worlds. In other words, in each level of explanation will reveal to you the inner workings of that particular world. Now, how does this sort of play out in various commentaries? How does this play out in understanding verses in the Torah? Okay, so we have an incident in this week's Torah reading. Every week we read one section from the Torah. There's 53 called Parshiyot in the Torah, and there's basically 53 weeks in the year. So more or less one a week. Sometimes it turns out that there's 2 a week, but for some towards the end of the year. But in any event, let's not get into that now. Basically one section a week. Now, the section that we're reading now is right at the end of the book of Genesis, the last section in the book of Genesis, the section which is called Vayechi, right? Vayechi, and he lived. Vayechi Yaakov, it's talking about Jacob who lived to quite a ripe old age, although he did not live to the age of his fathers and his forefathers. In other words, the age of his father Isaac, who was passed away at 180, or to the age of Abraham. He lived a somewhat less, he died at 137. Okay, which is not bad, but okay. Let us just tell the story, or part of the story of what is going on at the end of the book. Jacob is about to die. He's about to pass on. even though it says, and he lived. The truth is that according to the sages, they explain, according to Kabbalah in particular, they explain that he actually never passed away, he never actually died. Even though it says that that his soul left him and they buried him and so on and so forth, but nevertheless, the sages say that Jacob did not die. Now, what does that mean that Jacob didn't die? On the simple, straightforward pshat level, on the simple, straightforward level, of course he died, right? He passed away. It says even it states explicitly in the Torah Vayigva, right? He passed away, or Vayamot, he passed away. So how could we explain, therefore, that he didn't actually pass away? One of the interpretations of this is that because of the soul which is eternal, therefore he did not die. Since he identified primarily with his soul and he had transcended his body, therefore he did not die. Another explanation is because Jacob represented the concept of truth. There's a verse that says, Titen emet leYaakov, give truth to Jacob, kindness to Abraham, and truth to Jacob. In other words, the attribute of Abraham was kindness. The attribute of Jacob was truth. He was absolutely true to himself and to the what he knew to be the right thing, what he knew to be the proper thing to do. So he didn't deviate. And therefore, since truth is eternal, he too remained eternal. And a third explanation is that the Jacob represents the Torah. The Torah itself um, is called Yaakov, Jacob, and it's called Jacob, and it's called Israel as well. Israel was another name. That was the name he was given after he fought with the angel of Esau and overcame him. He was given the name Israel. And the name Israel represents the sentence. There are 600,000 letters of the Torah. Shishim Rivo, what Yot La Torah. There's 600,000 letters of the Torah, and that makes up his name Israel. So therefore, he is eternal because the Torah too, the Torah being the truth and being God's wisdom, is eternal. Okay, that is the the concept of Jacob passing away. But the section that I want to look at over here is when before he passes away, before he passes on, let's say, not passes away, he just passes on. He blesses his sons. He calls them all into him and he blesses them. And he starts off by talking to his oldest son, Reuven. The oldest son was named Reuven, or Reuben. And he says as follows. Now, Reuben was the first son of his first wife. Jacob married 4 women, and Reuben was the first son of his first wife. Now, it was always traditional in certainly in those times, and traditional in Jewish law as well. Subsequently, after the Torah was given, which was much later, but nevertheless they lived by these laws even before the Torah was given. So Reuven was the Bechor, he was the firstborn. As such, the firstborn is given not only the status of firstborn, which means that he inherits double from his father, he inherits a double portion. So let's say there were 10 sons. So they divided therefore into 11 portions, and he gets 2 portions. Every other son gets 1 portion. And not only did he get the double portion as the Bechor, as the firstborn, but he also traditionally, the firstborn was also the leader of the family. He became the scion, Sion, the scion of the family, the leader of the family. And he also did the divine service. He also became like the priest of the family. That's the way it was until the Torah was given. But, or actually until this point when Jacob takes away from Reuven, he takes away from him the leadership, in other words, what's called the kingship of the family, and he takes away from him the priesthood. He only lets him keep the status as oldest son. And this is what we're going to explain now. Like why was this that he did this? The reason was as follows. There were two incidents where Ruvain um, failed in his duties. He failed to do what really should have been done. The first incident was when it came to the selling of Joseph. The brothers had decided that Joseph was a nuisance, and it was more than he was just a nuisance. It was actually spiritual reasons that they had for wanting to get rid of him. But they decided that they're going to get rid of him. They're going to kill him. Some of the brothers decided like that, and Ruvain, the oldest brother, when Joseph came to them in a place called Shechem, uh, Jacob had sent Joseph to see how the brothers were doing, which was a big mistake because they actually disliked him. Why did they dislike him? Or let's say a little bit stronger, why did they hate him? What was the reason for yeah, Alan, you're right. He did have 10 sons. I just said by way of example, just to explain it a little bit easier. That's all. I just said 10 sons. If we're talking about dividing up, if there are 10 sons, then you count it, you divide the wealth into 11 portions. You give the oldest son two, and then everybody else gets only one. Yeah. Okay. That's what I meant. Okay. So to get back to what we were saying. Um, Joseph being sent to by Jacob to see what his brothers were up to, and his brothers were they were pretty upset with him. Why were they so upset with him? Because they had a tradition already. They knew they had a tradition that Yehuda, would be the king. He would be the king of the family. They knew that he would be the king of the family. Somehow or another, they didn't know how it would happen. It was supposed to be Reuben, but when Joseph came and he said to them that I had a dream, and in my dreams you bowed down to me, um, there was the sheaves of wheat that were bowing down to his sheaf, and then the sun and the stars, the sun and the moon and the stars were bowing down to his star. So they all understood that Joseph had sort of dreams of grandeur, and he thought that he would be king. And when he kept on sort of pressing the issue, at least in their minds, they decided to get rid of him. And so when Joseph came, they were about to kill him. And Reuven, the oldest, said, no, let's not kill him. Let's just put him in a pit. We'll let him die in the pit. Now, Reuben's intention was not to let him die in the pit, but as soon as the brothers had left, he had urgent business to do. He had to go serve his father, or he had to be busy with certain things, certain obligations that he had. And he was going to come back and take Joseph out of the pit and release him and take him back to his father. So that was his intention. But he said put him in the pit, and then Judah was the one that said, "No, don't. Let's not just let him die in the pit. Let's sell him into slavery. Let's sell him as a slave." Okay, so that was the first thing that Reuben did, that he shouldn't have done. The second one was after his mother, after Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, had passed away, after she died, then Jacob moved his tent or he moved Bilhah into his tent. Bilhah was one of the maidservants, was Rachel's maidservant, into his tent. In other words, she sort of displaced everybody else as now the main wife. And Reuben was very, very upset because his mother, who was the first person that Jacob married, his mother Leah, she was the one that really, by rights, should have been the second most important wife. In fact, she was possibly in some ways the most important wife. She was the one that he married first, even though it was through trickery. But nevertheless, she was one of the daughters of Laban. She was the second daughter. There were two daughters, Rachel and Leah, Rachel and Leah. They were the two daughters of Lavan, and their half sisters were the sort of their maid servants. They also became Jacob's wives. Long story. I don't want to go into it now how it happened, but in any event, that's what happened. So Reuben was pretty upset that that Jacob had now chosen one of the minor wives rather than his own mother, Leah, Reuben's own mother, Leah, as his main wife. So what did he do? He moved Bilhah's bed out of his father's room and moved his mother's bed into the room. And the Jacob was um, did not appreciate the interference. Let's put it that way. He did not appreciate the interference. So now along came Judah, who now replaced. He was the one in the blessings. He was the one who was told and was told to all the brothers that Judah would replace Reuven as the king, and that Levi would replace Reuben as the tribe from which the high priest comes, from which the priests in general and the high priest in particular come. And without going to the story about the high priest, but why was it that Judah took over the kingship? Because Judah showed certain traits of leadership. What are these traits of leadership? They are not simply traits of leadership that you get by birth, but they're traits of leadership that are cultivated. What had happened with Judah was as follows: stories. These stories are simple stories, straightforward stories that are told in the Torah. That's part of Pshat, right? Part of the straightforward stories of the Torah. The story was as follows: that Judah, in his um, in saving in saving the life of Joseph, even though he didn't completely save the life of Joseph, he said he sold him into slavery, but in saving the life of Joseph, did something which stood up against all the consensus of his brothers. He stood up against them and he said, no, that's the wrong thing to do. We can't kill him. The maximum we can do is sell him into slavery. Now, should he sold him into slavery? That's another whole question. Let's not get into that issue so much, but he nevertheless did what was necessary to save the life of Joseph. There was a second incident later on when Judah his wife had passed away, and he was tending his sheep, and they passed apparently a harlot by the side of the road, and he went to have relations with her. He was intimate with her, and she said, "What will be my payment?" And he said, I'll give you a goat or whatever, a couple of goats from the flock, and what are you going to really leave as a deposit?" Because he didn't have them with him. So she said, "Leave your stick and your your signet ring and etc. Leave those with me." And anyway, who was this woman? This woman turned out to actually be his daughter-in-law. Now, what had happened was that the daughter-in-law, whose name was Tamar, she was a very beautiful woman, and her husband, Er, was loath to spoil her beauty. He didn't want her to become pregnant and spoil her beauty. I don't know why he would think it would spoil her beauty. In fact, when a woman becomes pregnant, that is actually increases her beauty. But nevertheless, that's what he was only into the looks, I suppose. That was the most important thing in the world to him. Unfortunately, he was like one of these Hollywood types, and he didn't want her looks to be spoiled, and as a result, he wouldn't let her become pregnant. He used various means to prevent the pregnancy, and as a result, his life was taken away because of that particular sin. And so the law it's called the Levirate law, the law of the Levirate law, which means Levirate marriage, that when a man passes away without having any children, the next brother or the oldest brother takes his wife takes the deceased person's wife as a wife, and the child that they have together is called after the deceased brother's name. So his brother took her as a wife, and his name was Onan, and he also did not want to spoil her beauty, and the same thing happened to him. He's also his life was terminated from above because of his unwillingness to. Now there was a third son that Judah had, and the third son he didn't want to give to Tamar. Now, because he felt that Tamar, two of his sons had already died, he only had one left, and he felt was sort of caused by Tamar. But in any event, so she hid by the side of the road, and she enticed him to have relations with her, and she became pregnant. And when she became, and I know it's a long story, but it's important nevertheless. Um, and When she became pregnant, Judah had said that she obviously was unfaithful. Um, she was supposed to wait for the youngest brother, even though he had really no intention of giving him to her. But she was unfaithful, and then she should be burned at the stake. She should be put to death. And she just said to him, who the person who impregnated me is the one who owns the signet ring and so on. And Judah recognized that were his, and he admitted his guilt. And that's why, according to the simple, straightforward explanation of things, Judah the became the leader of the family. Why? Because he was willing to admit that he was wrong. He was willing to admit that he was wrong. And that shows that he wasn't into things for himself. When was he not into things for himself? In the first story, when he saved the life of Joseph, and the second story, when he saved the life of Tamar. He could have saved himself a lot of embarrassment by just letting the victim, Tamar, be burned at the stake, and nothing, no one would have known the better. She wasn't going to tell, and he wasn't going to say anything. Well, actually, he didn't know. He only knew when she told him. But in any event, Judah admits the truth, and he saves their lives. That's the concept of a king. The concept of a king is someone who cares not for himself, but for the life of others. Judah was so busy he was so contrite and so busy doing what's called tshuva, repenting for his sin, his sins of putting Joseph in the pit and then moving his father's bed, that he was busy with it years and years later. He was still busy repenting. He was doing a little bit too much repentance. Had he thought about other people, had he thought more about his father, had he thought more about his brother, he wouldn't have been away doing what he had to do, and he wouldn't have left Joseph in the pit in the first place. He should have stood up and said no. Okay, that's the simple explanation of the Torah. Okay, that's the straightforward, that's what happened, those are the incidents. Now, let me give you the next level of explanation of the Torah. This is from somebody called the Bal Haturim. Well, we're going to talk about Remez now, right? Wait till we get to Sword. Sword is the most interesting, obviously. Ruvain, says the Bal Haturim, Ruvain is the gematria, the numerical value of Lo Bechor. He is not the firstborn. In other words, even though practically speaking he was the firstborn, but he did not take all the duties of the firstborn in terms of kingship and in terms of priesthood because of his lack of character, essentially, right? So he's not the Bechor. He did not become he did not in every way ascend to the positions that he should otherwise have held. There is another explanation which he brings, the Bal Haturim, and again this is Remez, the Remez way of looking at things. He says as follows: one of the praises of Judah that Jacob says about Judah, about Yehuda, that Yaakov says about Yehuda is Miteref b'ni alita, from the tearing apart of my son Joseph, alita, you rose up, right? You rose up. In other words, you refused to take part in the tearing apart of my son. So the Baal HaTurim says that this word alita, that you rose up, is mentioned 3 times in the Torah. This is one of the times. There's the second time it's mentioned is you rose up onto the bed of your father. That's talking about Reuben, when he rose onto the bed of his father. In other words, by taking his father's bed, or by moving his mother's bed into his father's tent, against the will of his father. It's as if he went onto his father's bed. As if he went onto his father's bed. So again, the word rose up is used over there. And then the third time that the word alita is used is for is when it talks about alita lamarom. It's in Psalms. A verse in Psalms is talking about Moses when Moses went up on high to receive the Torah. So the word alita is used in all three. That's what Remez does. It uses words which are perhaps in different contexts to make things meld together. Why was Judah the one who became the leader? Because just as he rose up from the tearing apart of his own brother, just as Reuven rose up against his father and moved his bed in the wrong way, that's the wrong kind of alita, and compared with Moses who rose up on high, that's more the Judah type person. In other words, the person who rises up beyond his normal everyday capacities. He rises up to beyond what it means to be a simple, straightforward human being. He rose up on high to the heavens. Okay, that's that type of explanation, the Remez explanation. All right, we're gonna get to all of this when we come to sword, and we'll pull it all together as you'll see shortly. I know this is kind of long-winded, but I hope you're not getting bored. Okay. Um, Third explanation is called, as we said, drush. And when we said that Judah, one of the things that Jacob says about Judah is that he crouched like a lion, right? He crouched like a lion. So one of the commentary says as follows, that the characteristic of Judah, of a person like Judah, is even though sometimes he falls, he even falls to his knees, he bows down to the wrong thing. Nevertheless, he will always get up like a lion. Eventually, he will get up. Thank you, Carla. Eventually, he will get up like a lion. He doesn't fall into the arms of despair, right? Judah is not someone who despairs. He takes the situation the way it is, and when he realizes and acknowledges, very important part of realization is not only realizing that you screwed up, that you messed up, but that you acknowledge it and you admit it, then you can start looking for solutions. If one starts looking to blame somebody else for your situation, then obviously that's one can never be a leader. A leader is someone who acknowledges his errors, acknowledges his mistakes, and does his best to rectify them, but rectify them in such a way that he doesn't fall into despair. Not like Reuven, that Reuven was busy fasting and praying and spending a lot of his day fasting and praying for what he had done wrong. Good, fast and pray for what you do wrong, but keep an eye open for what needs to be done. Not Don't look at self-perfection, look at what you can do for others. And that's what uh, thank you, that's what Judah did. So the homiletical explanation of this of the Judah scene is that here is a person who, even though he has failings and he has shortcomings, he nevertheless acknowledges them, and he works on getting himself to a better place. He works on getting himself and raising himself up, va'alita, to raise himself up to a higher situation. Till eventually one can raise oneself up, like Moses raised himself up to ascend the mountain to receive the Torah. One can do that as well. One can raise oneself up in that way. Okay, so that's the corresponding to the world of Bria and the homiletical explanation. Now we get to the Sod, the explanation from the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria. Okay, now we have to give a bit of history again. Right in the beginning of mankind, really, Adam had two sons, Cain and Abel, Cain and Havel. And as we know, Cain killed Abel, jealousy. Right? They had an argument about who who owns what, and the division of the world, and so on and so forth. He said, I'm the firstborn, and therefore I get the whole thing, and whatever. Let's not get into the whole discussion. But nevertheless, there was an argument, and Cain killed his brother. Okay, so the Arizal explains as follows: that Cain had to be rectified. How is it going to be rectified? After he died, and he's obviously his body decomposed, but what happens to his soul? So as we know, the soul has various aspects to it. There's three aspects of the soul that reincarnate. The three lowest aspects. The highest two aspects of the soul do not reincarnate. They're beyond reincarnation. They transcend reincarnation. But there's three lower levels of the soul called nefesh, ruach, and neshama. We don't need these anymore. We don't need that. Let me just stop the share here. Okay. There's nefesh, ruach, and neshama, the soul that gives life, the life which is essentially the life force of the body. Ruach is the emotional, the life force of the emotions, and neshama is the life force of intellect, consciousness, and so on and so forth. So the three parts of Cain's soul that had to be rectified were not rectified all at once. They were rectified in different reincarnations. Now, okay, let me just see here, just 1 second. Okay. Since Reuven was the Bechor, since he was the firstborn, he was actually supposed to rectify a large part of the soul of Cain, because Cain was also the Bechor. Just 1 second here. Let me just see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Reuven was supposed to actually rectify all three aspects of the soul. I'm sorry, I read it wrong here. Reuven was supposed to act and rectify all three aspects of the soul, but when he didn't, then it was given to various later generations to actually rectify. So, the first, because he messed up, because Reuven messed up with the whole story with Bilhah, therefore he lost the concept of the firstborn. He lost the privileges of the firstborn. He was only now biologically the firstborn, but he was not able to lift up like the king does, and he wasn't able to lift up like the high priest does. How does the king lift up things? The king lifts up the people by being the positive example for them. The priest lifts up the people by eliciting blessings from above. And this is what Reuven now forfeited by his foolishness, by his foolish moves. And the Arizal then goes on to say that who was the one that managed to therefore rectify or partially rectify Cain? That was Yehuda. And later on, Moses rectified the last part of his soul that had to be rectified. That was rectified by Moses. Both of them, because the word aliyah, alita, the word alita, the word to rise up, to ascend, is mentioned with both of them. In the case of Judah, again, he ascended from tearing my son apart, was what Jacob said, and Moses ascended up the mountain. That ascent was not only an ascent of their own, it wasn't their own ascent, it was also the ascent of the soul. In other words, the rectification of the soul of Cain. And yeah, therefore, when says the Arizal, therefore, there was one part of the soul of Cain that was left, and that was rectified by Jethro, Yitro, Moses' father-in-law. He rectified that third part of the soul. Um, and that's why an expression is used over the Yeter Seit. Yeter Seit means to lift up. He was given, because he was the firstborn, he was given more power. But this more power he misused, and therefore it was given to Yeter, which is another name for Yitro, right? Yeter and Yitro. It's the same name, except with slightly different letters at the end. Let me just show you over here. All right, Yeter is written like this in Hebrew. That's a Yud, Taf, Resh, right? Yeter means more. The firstborn is given more. And the name Jethro is Yitro. In other words, Jethro, he had 10, he was actually had 10 names, or one main name was Yitro and 10 nicknames. His nickname was Yeter. One of his nicknames was Yeter. So he took that firstborn quality from Ruvain and he elevated it. How did he elevate it? He elevated it by actually he was a convert. He converted to Judaism. Now, this doesn't mean to say that everybody has to, or that anybody has to convert to Judaism. It's a long and difficult process, and it's not actually something that the rabbis recommend. If a person wants to convert, that's one thing, but there's no recommendation. People are born the way they're born for a reason, and he felt that he needed to, that's what he needed, and so that's what he did. But what did he do? He also rose up from an idolater, essentially. He was a priest of Midian, and Midian was idolatry, right? They were involved in idolatry, to the recognition of the oneness of God. So that was Yeter, Yitro, and he brought the extra special quality of Ruvain as the firstborn into back into holiness. So there were three people, therefore, that rectified Cain. They were Judah and Moses and Yitro. They rectified him altogether, and therefore Cain rather was once more, his soul was able to be reinstated, so to speak, to to the way it was before his sin. Okay, to just finish off here. No, this is more or less, this has been a little bit of a difficult, class. With so many things going on today that I didn't really have time to prepare it fully. But in any event, that is the story of the four levels of explanation of the Torah, explained according to the incident that happened with Reuven and Yehuda. And therefore, we see that all of these four levels of explanation, all of them are valid, and all of them are true, and all of them are good. But there are four different levels of explanation, four different levels of understanding. And perhaps in a future class, we'll go some more into some of the differences between the Hasidic viewpoint and the regular Kabbalistic viewpoint. And we'll understand what the Baal Shem Tov added to the teachings of the Arizal, perhaps in the near future. Are there any questions?